All right. Well, welcome to Crip Campus. I am Cindy Nover. I use she, her pronouns. Who else do we have here with us today?
I'm Ryan Parrey. I use he, him pronouns.
And we have a guest with us today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Happily, thank you. I am Dale Ireland. I use they, she pronouns, and I am a white person, and I know folks don't know what I look like, but I'm going to describe myself nonetheless. I have my hair pulled back in a ponytail. I'm wearing glasses and a blue and white striped t-shirt and a big smile.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. I assume the people who are listening to this would be aware of why it's important to provide a description of participants, just probably in general, but we didn't do that. And would anyone like to comment on what is important about making such a description? Who does that benefit? And when should we do
I
that?
gotta jump in because I think it benefits all of us. Because I think that when we create access, we are all benefiting from that access. The more access we create, the more people can participate, and the more that we can engage with one another.
One of the things I love about it is that we can't deny what we look like, nor should we try, right? And so to live in a world in which somebody would not want to say, well, I look like I'm about 60 years old, or I look like I'm carrying about 60 extra pounds, or I look like whatever, like my hair is kind of messed up today because I didn't wash it before I came here, or whatever. This is the kind of thing that we all should be able to quote unquote see, but we quote unquote can't see it if nobody provides an audio a description, right? And so I suspect that if I asked every professor here in a Zoom meeting to describe what they look like in actual detail, like some people would say, well, I don't want to act like I look like that. And then it's like, look, you are the age that you are, the race that you are in the room that you're in, whether that's messy or not. And so, yeah, I love it when people are bold enough to do that. And I hope to live in a world in which we're all doing that every time. So thank you for starting it out that way.
Yeah.
I want that world as well.
So should we do it then?
Let's do it.
I say I don't know where to start. I am 47. I think I look 47.
Okay.
What do I have? People say I have reddish. I say blonde, but
Okay.
reddish blonde hair, short hair, a beard. I'm wearing what do I have? I want to say brown shirt on, maroon.
My dad, who was colorblind, would also call your shirt brown or maroon. I would call it gray.
Really?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. I don't know that I am colored.
No, I was just saying like it, but my dad would also use those same words for this exact color.
Really?
Mhm.
Okay. Great. What do you look like?
I'm 46, so Ryan and I are a similar age here, and I look 46. I don't know what that means. I have short brown hair and glasses that have blue and gray frames, and I'm wearing a I don't know what this shirt is called. It's green and white, and it's got a zip up kind of a collar. And someone in my office here has a family member who works at Eddie Bauer, and she always brings me clothes that don't fit everyone else who gets free clothes at Eddie Bauer, and she gave me this shirt. So it's like an ass. Yeah.
Nice. It's cool.
Like, thanks. It might be too much detail. I thought.
But I mean, what I just noticed there is what we do for each other and for ourselves, right? Is well now, and this is how I understand the world. Right? We're making explicit our understanding of who we are and where we are
You're right.
for others, and what we want them to see.
Great point. Because I didn't name everything.
Right. I am 47, and I think I look 42.
Okay.
Or I didn't say how much gray is in my beard that I have.
Great point. Right.
Right.
But people are making judgment. I'll teach, so people are making judgments about me that I might not mention in one of these descriptions, right? Like, and so why not let everyone form judgments about me, good or bad, not just the people who have sight that would allow them to take all this in, right? Like, yeah.
Can I ask our first question?
Please do.
So Dale, full disclosure, Dale and I've known each other for at least 15 years.
Yes. Yep. Easily.
Yeah, and it started with as I remember, we got mixed up together running professional development. Believe it or not, professional development workshop, get trainings, get-togethers, and then a mentoring program through the Society of for Disability Studies
Oh, okay.
back in, the 2010s. Yeah. And but catch us up. Who are you? Where? Tell us everything you want us to know about you, your background, the kinds of work you do around access.
Oh boy. Okay. Presently, I'm adjunct faculty and I'm also a doctoral candidate. I had to take some leaves of absences while I was collecting some chronic illnesses. I do work in composition, disability studies, and literature. Let's see. Things that I think that you should know about me. When we met, Ryan, I had learning disabilities, ADHD, and some mobility disabilities. And I've picked up about 4 chronic illnesses since. And when I met you, I would use a cane or a walker, and I'm now in a wheelchair, and I spend about 95% of my life in bed. And the internet makes it feel like I'm not spending 95% of my life in bed. I attend conferences, I teach, I go on field trips. I spend a lot of time out in the world that way. My research right now examines representations of accommodations in relation to disability, illness, and caregiving in 18th century and 19th century British literature. And my attention right now is on how narratives distribute care, responsibility, and value. So in this work, I'm exploring how accommodations function both as narrative form and in relation to practice that negotiates inclusion, exclusion, and interdependence. And I could say that more clearly by just saying that I'm using I have a couple of terms that I'm using that I created: interdependent accommodations, which function in ecologies, and transactional accommodations, which function in economies and are highly problematic. And those are what I think most of us are familiar with. Let's see. Oh, and I have puppies and I hang out with my partner. And I really like hanging out with the birds and trying to guess if I'm accurately noticing which bird is doing what, and I never am, but I really enjoy it.
Great. I don't know which thing you just said is more interesting. That's all good. Yeah. Oh wow. Mm.
You just shared that you have some disabilities. What drew you to this work to begin with?
Yeah.
Oh, that's such a good question because I don't think I ever have not been doing this work. I think of who I was in kindergarten and who I would hang out with and how I understood the world. And oh, that's such a good question, Cindy. Maybe I'll consider my adult self.
Well, the terms you just used.
Yeah.
You were compelled to create them. Why? I know that's not quite the same question, but
The words, it's the same reason I created uncanny accommodations. There are things that I don't have the language for yet that I want to talk about, that I would like to address. There are problems that I need to name in a specific way, and I can't quite find that language. So that's when I move into terms. And so I am spending a lot of time working with interdependent and transactional accommodations and what that tells us about who we value as people and who we don't.
mhm. So when did that start to matter to you? Like, and I guess kindergarten.
Nice.
Easily kindergarten. The people that I would hang out with, maybe because in, let's see, when was it? Second grade, first grade, where I would be pulled out of a room and go into what was then called special ed.
Mhm.
And maybe it was in part that experience of separate. And I don't know. I think that at a very young age, I felt as though I was a problem. Maybe that's a part of it.
Mm.
That in school, I was a problem, and the way that we were going to address the problem was to pull me out in a room and drill me with phonics, whatever it might be, that was not helpful. It's very unhelpful. And then I think, Ryan, it's a kind of a recommitment every year. So in a personal way, as someone who's late dosed, diagnosed autistic, I think that there's a very personal relationship to my work, but I think that as an adult, much of what It's not motivate. That's stronger than it's not motivating. Much of what I do is in relation to working with my students, and I think it's witnessing what my students negotiate that is what keeps me so connected.
I have a question about this is completely not on our list of questions, but I'll lead into a question because I am currently in a class about literature that's written in Spanish, and I don't want to say Spanish literature because I don't want to imply that it's from Spain. And so far, we're in week 4, and we have already read 3 stories from the 1500s, 1600s, 1700s that involve people with disabilities. And it'll be like one character. And so I'm the one in the class who's like, hey, what's the meaning of this character here? Because I don't think you would just randomly, if there's only like 5 characters in a story, have one of them have a disability. It's possible, but part of me suspected that that was not the case, right? That the blind character must see more than others. And there's one that's, it's basically called like the village idiot, to pardon the phrase. And I mean, he's called Bobo, which in Spanish is like kind of dumb, right? Like, and he seems to be closer to the real truth of things than the other townspeople or whatever, right? So we've all seen these kind of narratives, but what's going on in 18th century literature around these topics? I'm just personally curious.
So we still have the monster or the anointed by a holy one. We have these tropes as well, but there's a shift, especially toward the latter part of the 18th century and the 19th century. And what's interesting is there are representations in literature where embodied difference is just embodied difference. You work in coal mine, you lose an arm. This is what we do. The family is not that everything was wonderful and sparkly, but we will come together as a community, family, even chosen blood. And there's this shift in the 19th century where we move from this understanding of ordinary bodies to what Rosemary Garland Thompson identifies as the normate, right? So we're creating this idea of normal, and to sustain this idea of the normate, we need disability to say this is what it's not. And so what's interesting to me in the 19th century is the shift in language, description, and accommodations, and how accommodations are represented in this shift where they were, and I used this term a little earlier, so when accommodations are interdependent, and that's before we have this shift, and then they become transactional, and they are still transactional. And that's what has my attention.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I have class in an hour and a half, so I will go and sort of include some of these ideas as we think about those characters, right? Like, what's the relationship between them and other people, and is the point to reinforce the normies or to challenge what might be extant, right? So anyway, that was just a personal question about literature.
There's something else that's so fascinating in this literature, in Victorian literature. I am taken by how many accommodations are contextualized as a daily occurrence when someone goes to a window to get information to someone who can't move to that window and bring it back. And then how we see that shift to something that is transactional. Literature is a great place to look back at ourselves, reflect on ourselves.
That's cool. Well, I'll take this to our next question, which is about writing, since we're sort of on the topic. In composition and writing classrooms, expectations around good writing or clear communication often seem neutral, but they can do a lot of gatekeeping work. So how do you see those expectations shaping who has access and who doesn't? Or maybe you could explain our question about gatekeeping work, right? Is there such a thing as neutrality or whatever, right? And so how do these sort of supposedly neutral rules function to maintain lack of access or whatever you see as relevant?
Oh, this question is so important to me. Good writing often sounds neutral to some people, or it's understood that way, but it's doing a lot of gatekeeping work in that. It tends to privilege certain ways of thinking, linearity, fluency, even emotional register. And these are concepts that align with some people more than other people. And so what concerns me is that the language we use. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to social justice. I'm bouncing right now to all of these different ideas. The idea that there is one proper language is just incredibly problematic. And people will often say that students are at a disadvantage if they don't know, and I'm doing air quotes right now around proper English. And I think that we need to pause collectively and ask ourselves what we actually are calling proper, because language is not neutral, as you were asking about gatekeeping, and it stems from histories of white language supremacy. There's a statement from the College Composition and Communication. They have several statements, and there's one from Black Linguistic Justice talking about Black linguistic justice that is incredibly important. And the argument is that we need to teach our students to question the ideas of gatekeeping proper English and privileging different types of Englishes. And what often goes unspoken is that some students are asked to distance themselves from their own language in order to be read as intelligent. I really want to emphasize that, being read as intelligent. I just resist the idea that students need to approximate proper English in order to be understood or read as capable. And so the goal is not to withhold knowledge of dominant conventions, but also to acknowledge that there are dominant conventions. And so that students should understand how language operates across contexts. And I want students to get curious about how language attaches itself to different forms of power. That was probably very vague.
No,
I'm going to be giving a talk, a workshop with another faculty member and two students, and we're actually going to be talking about problems with language and around neurodivergent students and AI, and how AI is framed as not sounding what's inhuman, it's flat, and a lot of descriptors that are used to describe how we write as neurodivergent people are being used to describe AI, and what that experience is like for students in classrooms to have their own writing be framed in this way.
wow, that's so interesting. I was thinking of two recent examples from my own classes, but then what you said went even deeper. Can I share that? So just, I mean, literally yesterday, over the weekend, I walked by some teenagers and somebody said, I low key want to try something. And did I talk to you about this? Yeah, it's just been on my mind. And anyway, I brought it up in class yesterday. I said, I understand what low key means, but in this particular context, what is being communicated? And we talked about it. And I said, okay, I get it. I don't have a problem with it. Who might have a problem with it? But you know what I mean. I'm not some 47-year-old person talking about the kids these days. But one of the students said it maybe one of the reasons you're unfamiliar with it is it comes from AVE, a African American Vernacular English. And I said, that's entirely possible. And then we were able to have a conversation about that. We were talking about law that day. And so we say, well, there's laws in language, right? There's a grammar to every language, and knowing the rules is one thing, right?
Yes.
And what I'm hearing you say is, yeah, and those rules are not neutral, and knowing them and using them correctly is all about how you're read and and if you are read as a bad speaker, if you can't put on the
Right. And you said something very important there about languages having grammar. ADE, that there's grammar, there's structure, right? But we're privileging one, and why, and who's benefiting from that.
and now, and I don't want to step on the toes of your workshop coming up, but it seems like when we describe writing as flat, and I know what you mean, why is that bad? Because that is how we talk about it. We don't say it sure is flat in an excited way.
Right. I think that's a great question. I think that there are a lot of different choices that we make when it comes to writing. I understand writing as a practice of choices much more than I do as adherence to or breaking rules. I understand it as a practice of choices. And I think that there are times, and we could also, my students and I have had conversations about what does it mean when writing is flat, and that will mean different things to different people, and it will also mean different things to different students across different disciplines and majors, right? So there are some majors where students are cultivating writing that would be understood as flat in other places, and it may be more accessible as well to certain people. It may provide access to complicated and nuanced information. And so I think that it's there's nothing necessarily wrong with someone describing writing as flat. I'm not quite sure what that means in general. I'm not quite sure what it means if writing doesn't sound human. But I do know that my neurodivergent students have been in classes where they worked with speech pathologists to change speech patterns sound, and this is sounding a specific way, not being understood. And from my students, I have learned that as they are in different classes and faculty are talking about AI, that it is being described in a way that they have had their own work and writing described back to them throughout their time in academia, and I mean K through 12 as well. Ask that next question.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going. This reads transitions. I so well here you just. I'm sure in the last as we've been talking here. I'm sorry. I am looking on my phone for our questions, and here it is. So we've talked about access every single episode. We've started talking about it here. So it's a word access, right? Is a word we hear constantly, especially in education. It can mean I'm gonna go off script. It can mean look, sound, and feel different depending on where you are, who you are, and what contexts. So in your work, whether that's writing work, research work, or teaching work, how do you understand and approach access? And how do you think we should?
That's a great question, and I'm going to hang out with the last question as I bridge it to this question. When it comes to access, that might mean that I don't describe writing as mechanical, understanding that my neurodivergent students have had a lifetime of being told that their writing sounds mechanical, inhuman, flat, rote, robotic. Access, it's so and that example is allowing me, I hope, to emphasize that access is relational.
Hmm.
And it's relational and it's ongoing. It's something we never realize. Again, to me, it's a practice. Obviously, it's not something that you do once and solve. It's not the checklist, as many of us talk and write about. And it is something that we keep adjusting. In a writing classroom, it means not adding accommodations to a fixed structure, but being willing to change. And I want to emphasize that's collaboratively change. So it's a collaborative endeavor. And it means asking what kinds of thinking are invited, what forms are possible, and how are we going to use time and labor collectively? And so I'm going to go back to my term transactional. I'm especially interested in moving away from transactional forms of access, where access is something one person gives another or another receives it. And I'm more interested in an interdependent type of access where support is shared and it's shaped collectively.
I'm reminded of the first day of last quarter where we were going over our Canvas page in the room, and I said something like, "Hey, everybody, I've done my best to prepare and make our materials as accessible as possible. If you find something that isn't, please just let me know. I'll work to fix it." And somebody said out loud in the room, "You mean you want us to do your job for you?"
I don't get it yet.
And I thought a lot about what I should have said. And I don't remember what I did say, but what I say now, if it ever comes up again, and in advance, is because, like I've already said, my access statement on the syllabus says access is something we do together every day. And so that's what I want you to do, Jeremy. Do access with me, not expect me to have done it and done it perfectly.
And frankly, I've been doing your job for you this whole time, Jeremy, by staying in the box that you want me to stay in, thinking of access as this transactional thing, like you said, something that you give to me, but only if I'm well behaved enough to receive it or whatever. So, like, yeah, I do want you to do my job for a minute because it's all of our jobs. But like 45 years before this conversation, I've been doing yours, frankly. So, like, sorry about that, Jeremy.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's his name.
It was my example, but it sounds like I hit a nerve.
Because you said, I've been thinking about what I should say. I'm like, I got this.
Yeah,
Here's chat me in.
and then you point, always point. Yeah, well, right, because I mean, we're not surprised that somebody has this expectation, and because we all grew up with, well, that is access. Of course, it's transactional. Of course, you have to number one justify it and prove that you deserve it, and then articulate those needs just so, and so on. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, same more. So we have feelings here. Pretend here I'll be Jeremy and you be you.
This is amazing. I love what's about to happen here.
Come on, Mrs. Teacher. Well, see, they excuse me. That's what a real student would do. Dr. Ireland, Professor Ireland, or Dale. What do you mean we should check and make sure things are accessible? That's your job.
I think that's a great question. And it's so important, Jeremy, that what I'd like to do is just stop and have a change of course so that we can and sit with that. So what is access, Jeremy?
It's when, like, this is Jeremy's voice. You know, bro, like when somebody using a wheelchair can't use the steps, but there's a ramp. Or like when I go to read something, I can immediately get to and just start reading the thing I need to read.
Jeremy, I appreciate that because I think what you're sharing with us is an understanding of access that we've all been taught, right? That I think that that's what we have all been taught access is, that it's something individual so that a person can use a wheelchair, one person can do a thing. And now you have me wondering if we start at that place, what would it mean if we thought about access collectively? So not just about that one person, but what if, Jeremy, what if that one person in that wheelchair is the person that you would have a conversation with and get this really good idea about a topic from essay that you get really interested in, so much so that you end up doing a senior thesis on it. And you're not done with it. You really like that idea. No, you're going on to grad school. You want to continue to work with it. Okay. Ideas don't always mean that you end up in school forever. But the point I think is that, Jeremy, that access is something that enables us to be together collectively. And so maybe we shift our thinking about access as just whether or not my wheelchair can get into a space, but how can we be together in a space?
You really turned me around on this.
And a production note, can you edit out how I treated Jeremy and just stick with how Dale treated Jeremy? Because that was a lot more compassionate than my approach.
Yeah, but you saw it coming. You saw it coming. It's okay. No, but that's all of that is right. Each of that is a real reaction. Sure, we say it or do it in the moment or later or whatever, right? And because my Jeremy, listened to you and took what you had to say and really thought about it. Real Jeremy might be like, whatever, bro, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the hardest thing, Ryan, is that I can't get in and control the world the way that I want to. And I can just hope that as we each year, we continue to learn, me included, by the way, because there's some of Jeremy in me. I think there's some of Jeremy in all of us.
We all think we know how things should be and feel strongly about it usually. But it's interesting. I'm going to remember the name was Jeremy. I had a Jeremy in class last quarter, and that did happen, right? It was the same person, and they said at one point we were talking about, I had apologized. Class was starting a few minutes late, and I said, "Hey folks, I'm sorry. I'm just setting up the computer." And Jeremy said, "Well, our class normally starts about 10 minutes late." And I said, "What?" They said, "Well, yeah, I thought you knew that." And I said, "Hmm." And several other people in the room said, "You prioritize the time at the start of class for community building. That's when we talk about how are we? How was our weekend? What did you get? What do you remember from last class?" And I said, that's right. That's what we're doing, Jeremy. And then I did look at those other students and say, "Thank you. I'm glad that you're understanding what and why we do that." So that's access too, right? Because some people desperately need that time to be able to be there. We're in the room now. We're getting to it. If we just snap to it, we're missing a lot of folks, I think.
I agree with you. I also think that there's teaching pedagogy that talks about connecting what we've done previously to what we're doing now. I think acknowledging that we are embodied people matters, including classrooms, darn it. And we get to check in with one another. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think yes, I agree.
Okay.
I'm probably a little bit late to the game because I'm the only non-disability studies person in the room, but I'm very interested in and passionate about this. So I just now finished reading The Question of Access, A Question of Access,
Nice.
which is a book about by Tanya. What's how you say your last name?
Titchkofsky?
Titchkofsky.
Titchkofsky.
Okay.
Titch like the titch.
You don't have a word for that. Titch like a what? Witch?
So Titchkosky.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So I just finished reading that book, and the idea of access is sort of question, right? That's the title of the book, right? But I mean, so much of it fascinated me in terms of why do we already have in one scenario the author needs help because she gets kind of more or less lost with some like kind of confusing instructions on where she's supposed to go in a building, and then when trying to seek help, she says to someone, "Oh, well, I'm dyslexic, and more or less that's why I need help right now." And then the people are able to like help her, and we've talked on the show before about things that are sayable and not sayable. And basically, she's just kind of painting the idea that we all have this idea in our head of what is certain disabilities or what certain things mean, right? So if somebody in a meeting says, "Oh, well, I know we made a disabled bathroom, but right now it's closed and we don't have them in the other buildings, but we'll work on this one," or whatever. And she talks about just the fact that anyone can even say that and the listeners can be like, "Oh, okay, I understand what you're saying," and just put that in whatever container or disability they created for themselves is really interesting and something that I thought about because of my proximity to Ryan. But if somebody were to say, I'm on campus right now, if somebody were to say, "Oh, we don't have any bathrooms at all on campus right now because they're all broken. So sorry about that." The fact that anyone else in the room would say something like, "Oh, okay, well, better luck next time," to everyone who needed to use the bathroom like on that day is absurd. You can't even imagine it, right? And so the fact that we can imagine what I just described in scenario number one means it's sayable, right? And the fact that if somebody just says, "Oh, I have dyslexia," now I'm no longer wondering, like, what's your problem? I can help you find the building that you need because you told me you have dyslexia. But if you didn't tell me you have dyslexia, then I'm just like, what's wrong with this person, right? But somehow me telling you that I have dyslexia means something else in your brain. Like there's a container for that. That occupies some position, and that position means something to me, and I can therefore know how to interact with you after that, right? And so I'm giving some of my high points of the book, but I'm trying to lead into our next question, which is about like you talk about uncanny accommodations where access is technically present but doesn't quite work in practice, and that book talks about that a lot, right?
Well, can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I give it a quick? Again, this isn't in the classroom, but it happened with Tanya. It was either a year before or a year after The Question of Access came out.
Yeah.
And I happened to be at a Disability Studies Summer Institute in Toronto with Tanya Titchkofsky and all the classic Canadian disability studies folks of the early 2000s. And on the third day, in the middle of the afternoon, out in the hall, we saw a bunch of firefighters in firefighter uniforms walking down the hall. Then more quickly walking down the hall. And then we smelled smoke. And Tanya, who was in charge, went out and said, should we get out of here? What should we do? And they said, no, you're fine. And they said, no, you're fine. Don't move. Don't worry about it for a few minutes. And then said, you should all go wait in the safety zones. The elevators are turned off because of the fire, but that's where you should go wait. And eventually, after like 15 minutes, the whole group of us, 50 of us, 30 of us, decided collectively it's time to get out of here. And we helped each other down the 2 or 3 flights of steps out of the building. I mean, it really was. Visually impaired people were helping mobility impaired people. We were helping deaf people. We just, whatever we could do, we did it. And we got down the stairs as a group. And we, as a group, walked out the door and we're in the fresh air. And here comes the fire marshal. You guys are in trouble because we didn't take the access that was offered us, which was in this case to wait. And it's my understanding that Tanya said, no, you're in trouble. And we're going to work this out later.
Or after school.
Yeah. And that, I don't know, that's a very concrete example. Well, they had elevators, they had steps, it's all there.
Exactly. And so the book and then this question that I'm getting at is where does quote unquote access not work in practice? How do you see that playing out in classrooms or institutions, right? Because there's so many examples that we can name from our lives or from these books or whatever, where someone is kind of like just washes their hands of the idea that this place has access because, and in the building we have on campus, they call it the area of refuge that Ryan's referring to, right? Like, and there's a picture of a person in a wheelchair and there's a fire behind them, right? Like, and so I don't see what the problem is. We told you your corner to go wait in. I don't see what the problem is. We gave you one door that has a button on it or whatever. Like, we're doing access. So basically be quiet, right? And so this is a long question to find your opinion, Dale, on like, how do you see these uncanny accommodations in classrooms or institutions?
Really powerful examples and sadly, probably all too familiar to us and others. So for me, uncanny accommodations are a lot of things, but they're barriers represented as accommodations, and they carry the expectation that the disabled person will behave as an accommodated person. And so because uncanny accommodations often cause concealed and subsequently unaccounted for harm, they uniquely fortify and expand systemic ableism. And so I want to give an example, talking about my classroom. So here is an example. So I'll ask you to imagine that you're a disabled student. You've done everything that you're supposed to. You shared your accommodations letter with your professor. Your professor has read it. Everyone feels good. The semester begins. But what happens when those accommodations don't actually address the barriers that you're facing? And so that is what I call uncanny accommodations. So we have Annika, a disabled student who uses screen readers, whose accommodations letter was written for in-person classes, but now this person's learning over Zoom. Annika's professor, who's genuinely well-meaning, reads the letter and feels relieved. The accommodations listed are for things such as a front row seat, no in-person exams. And so the professors think, okay, my student's fully supported. We're ready to begin the semester. We don't have any of that in this online class. But when the professor's sharing her screen during class, Annika's screen reader can't access the text, right? And so the same is true in small breakout sessions where classmates might be sharing things. And in person, this professor had made a habit of reading texts aloud, but online, where students might be in noisy home environments or there were problems with the mic, the professor would just stop this practice. So here we have a student who can't access some of what's happening in class. They're taking notes as best as they can. They're trying to piece them together with documents the professor is sharing after class. But this student is always playing catch up, missing the live collaborative moments where knowledge gets built together. I'm going to keep talking about that. This is collective. Access it really is. And the student's also spending extra time on this class that's then taking time away from other courses and other coursework. And so here's where it becomes even more painful. Instead of identifying the barrier, both the student, Annika, and the professor begin to wonder, whether she's simply just not cut up for college. So the accommodation hasn't just failed her, it's actively redirected the blame onto her. And she's thinking she's accommodated. Faculty are thinking she's accommodated. And so that's the danger of uncanny accommodations. They don't just leave students unsupported. They make students believe the problem is themselves. So in short, uncanny accommodations do harm. I have more to say about this. I'll be doing that elsewhere. That's just, I think, one of the examples. And so sometimes we have people who decide students don't need accommodations, and they're better apt to determine that rather than accessibility services or disability services, a different type of problem. But then we also have faculty who think they are accommodating their students. Their students are not, but yet they have the expectations they should be performing as though they are. And the students internalize this as well.
Mm. I'm what do we say? I'm a little triggered by that. No, that definitely hits close to home from the student perspective, and probably from the teacher perspective too, because we don't know. What do you ever say to faculty, or just teachers, what have you, that think they're doing the right thing and don't understand the uncanniness?
I say do what Ryan does and spend that beginning time in class connecting and connect with your students. And don't treat access as a checklist. It's a relationship.
Mm.
And so that means asking questions about access throughout the semester, inviting students to ask questions about access. That means regularly asking, well, I just want to pause here for a moment. Is everyone able to access this material? It means being able to pivot, to make changes, to collaborate with students. It's an ongoing practice that we need to keep calling in collaboratively. And so this is where I would invite Jeremy to be a part of that calling in.
Oh yeah, Jeremy.
Yeah, I'm attached to Jeremy. Sorry.
Yeah.
Do you want to move on to our
Yeah,
next question?
yeah.
What do you think people in academic or institutional spaces most often misunderstand about access? Perhaps you've begun to address that, especially when they believe they're doing it right. Or I heard you say, I have more to say on that and I'll do it elsewhere. And so since this topic is thematically related to the previous one, this could be the place where you do the thing.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Well, this is a lovely elsewhere, so I will change it there, but thank you. Institutions often treat access as compliance. So if a policy exists, the work will probably get done, is the thinking. But compliance is not care, it's documentation. So access, by contrast, and I'm just going to keep saying this, it's who, it reveals who and what we value. So policies don't value people. People do. And I would want to be saying that to Jeremy as well. And when institutions rely on policy as proof of access, they substitute procedure for the relation that you're creating in that class, in the beginning of your classes, Ryan. And the substitution allows institutions to locate access at the level of the individual, which I think can be very problematic. Accommodation becomes something a student requests rather than something a system produces, withholds. And what I'm trying to say is that in that framing, the student appears as the site of the problem, oftentimes when it comes to accommodations. And institutions are framed as this neutral provider of solutions. And so what disappears are the systems through which ableism is produced and sustained. But I want to come back to something. I think it's what you said, Cindy. Well, actually, Ryan, too, and talking about that judgment and that constantly having to argue or justify someone's need for access. So even in spaces committed to access, there remains an ongoing calibration of who's asking for too much. This one hits home for, I think, a lot of us. Who is sufficiently deserving and whose needs can be absorbed without disrupting the institution's preferred pace, timing, structure. So then access isn't simply granted or denied, it's rationed, it's negotiated. And these again it's a transactional process. And it's shaped by what I think we might agree are these oftentimes unspoken hierarchies of, I think they're hierarchies of value. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm reminded of very recently we're going through processes to review and revise materials for Title II, and I was asked to look at something, and I wrote back and I said, I am more than happy to look at this. I will look at this. Heads up, I'm going to use my reader who lives in Philadelphia. We only work together so many hours a week. It might take a little bit, but this is on my radar and I know the deadlines. And I thought, well, should I say that? Or should I just risk being perceived as taking a long time?
Mm. Yeah.
Um,
I just want to say how important that is, Ryan. And then to that Title II work, I think one of the things that's missing is we're not talking about enough about how to teach our students to make their own work accessible. So when they leave our institutions, that they go out with the skills of making their own work accessible. Everything is being talked about in terms of faculty making their work accessible, but we need to be teaching our students how to make their work accessible to one another as well.
I don't think anyone would go for that. No, I had a conversation with a colleague of ours recently who was saying, but if only so many people need it in this format, then, but it takes me hours and hours and hours to get it that way. And yeah, saying, hey, I've done my best to make everything accessible on our Canvas page, all of our readings and stuff. If they're not, here's what you can do about it. Now, not to quote unquote do my job for me. Far from it. But because I've done what I can do, now here's some more that you can do if you want, or whatever. Am I misrepresenting what you just said?
I'm sorry because my mind is going to a podcast the two of you did previously, and I can't remember if it was the glasses example, but you were talking about faculty who are just saying this isn't my labor. That and the conversation the two of you are having, but this is our labor. This is what we do. This is right. And so we may not have institutional support, but the access need is not the problem here. The person who needs access is not the problem. Oh, I wish I could remember the example. One of you were talking about, would you say the same thing about glasses? I can't remember.
Sure. As some impairment that is like somehow beyond the pale of, well, I don't know, why do I have to do this work? Well, like more than half of us academics wear glasses, right? So it's a more relatable or digestible concept, I think. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And so, Ryan, I'm going to be very transparent. I was trying to listen to you, but I was trying to replay the podcast as you were speaking.
Oh,
I love that. That's multitasking.
wow, that's too much. Did not do that. I like this podcast, but that is too much. Um, hmm. But yeah, and to be clear, the fact that the problem is that the dominant system through which we can share materials, let's say PowerPoints or PDFs, are themselves inaccessible, and we're not taking pitchforks to Microsoft over that necessarily. Right.
But that is problematic, and then universities are working with third vendors. It's just layer upon layer of barrier. Yes. Yeah.
Good. I just want to make sure we said that out loud, I guess.
Yes. Important to say all that.
Well, I'm a terrible judge of how much time we have for things, but I do want to know what should I go to that last thing? What are you up to these days? What are you working on? What are you teaching? And most importantly, what stuff in that respect has you like excited?
I am teaching a course that I created called Writing Bad Bodies. And I love hanging out with my students. So that in that course, we're interrogating textual representations of disability, and we're attending to intersectional identities such as race and gender, and how these representations form perceptions of personhood. And then we're considering who benefits from written disenfranch. I can't say it correctly, so I'll just skip it over at the moment. Disenfranchisement. Sorry. We're gonna I'm gonna copy Cindy. We're probably gonna have to edit this out, but I don't care if we can keep it. I have myasthenia gravis, and so sometimes my nerves can't connect to my muscles, and I'm slowly losing speech. That's what I want to be able to say, and I'm fine if it stays in there. So disenfranchisement of marginalized bodies, which includes physical and mental disabilities. So that class just has me excited because I get to hang out with students, and that's my happy space.
That's all. I want to take the class. I think we all do. Good.
We have one more question on our slides.
Yeah.
We have a guest speaker, and we're going to be doing this every semester, and we open it up when we have a guest speaker. So I will keep in touch next time because we just did that yesterday.
Oh, who was it?
We had Katie Strom, who is in education, talking about a lost year and negotiating panic and anxiety disorder. And we just had a really engaging conversation after Professor Strom was talking about her article and work.
That's great. What is reverse?
A last question is, I'm not going to say on the pod, even though Ryan wrote the question this way, because I refuse to use that phrasing. But finally, we always emphasize on our podcast, Crip Campus, that access work is, first of all, work, and secondly, ongoing. With that in mind, what would you say access looks or feels like when it's genuinely present, if you've ever seen that or want to future trip with us, compared to when it's half-hearted or missing, which I think is the more common access that we observe?
Oh my gosh, I'm thinking of the Society for Disability Studies dance that would happen and how much access there was there and how I missed that.
Let's talk about that because I always think of it too. And famously, Sandy Schalk wrote that essay about it some time ago.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave. Sorry, the question's for you, but I'm going to talk instead. No, you talk. You go.
I will do this briefly, but I want to hear what you're going to say. We have more life because we're not spending our lives justifying, rationalizing, fighting, begging, fawning, trying to get access, trying to just be and do. So when the access is more there, I'm going to say more there, it feels less apparent, but that's not because something's missing, but it's because for me, I'm not constantly negotiating it. And there's flexibility without penalty. So Ryan, when you're talking about, do I just take more time or do I say this? All that energy, that labor, if I could put that energy somewhere else and it feels really good and I don't have to justify myself all the time. So the system can adjust without making me feel like I'm an exception because that's what systems do when they're framed as ecologies and not economies. And so interdependent accommodations happen in ecologies, and there's that collective togetherness, other terms I'm working on in my work, versus that transactional economy. And so when it's not there or half there, it just feels so conditional. So what does it feel like? It feels like dancing. It feels like dancing with Margaret Price in my chair, meeting Chris Gabbard, hanging out with you. It was so good. And it's something I get to carry with me forward. That's how good it is.
What's up with this dance? I know you're going to just tell the listeners what's going on at this dance because we can't really envision it yet.
I realize that non-STS people don't know about this, and I forget. So at the Society for Disability Studies conference, since the forever, I think, it's an academic conference for 3 days. And then at the very end, the last night, there's a dance.
Okay, but I mean, what's so accessible about this dance?
What's the deal?
Well, I don't know how many dances other people have been to as an adult. His daughter introduces you and you go down a red carpet. That's just part of it. What was so accessible? There's so much that's accessible.
The way that the space is laid out. It is, as somebody who writes these days about ableism as atmosphere, the ecology, the atmosphere, it's different. And it's different because of some work that was done in advance, but very much when you work it on the dance floor and it feels like you're doing your thing. And yeah, there's no apology, there's no expectation of
It's it. Ryan, that's it. You don't have to decide if you're just going to be understood as taking more time or even the explanation of the person you're working with. None of that is there. You're just dancing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
No, I mean, I hear in your enthusiasm that that is not how you feel. If I just invited you to we don't have this, but Society of Social Work Instructors Dance, where you might wonder if you can just dance, or wonder if you're taking up too much space, or someone might be looking at you on the dance floor, or even if what you're doing, you mentioned you use a wheelchair, is dancing, like according to the typical definitions of dancing or whatever, right? Like, and maybe the listeners wouldn't know that this burst of enthusiasm you just demonstrated is coming from the comparison between, I mean, again, we don't normally have dances as adults, but what someone might imagine, or if you just go to the bar or the club or whatever to go dancing, it sounds like this thing is different than that in a way that was really needed, or is quite a relief from what I'm gathering.
Yeah, there's just something about being able to have an embodied experience with other people in that range of difference for embodied experience together, where people collectively want everyone to have a good time and are invested in creating an accessible space together. It's magic. It's a disco ball.
Mhm. Well, that's what they call it now, right?
Yeah.
In the Ohio State University, where it is these days, that's their name for it.
Oh.
Yeah. And if you want to read about it, I know, like I said, Sammy Schalk has written an essay, right? It's an essay.
I think it's an essay. Oh, Shaw also has written so many good things on
Well-
Octavia. There's such a good scholar.
That brings up something that I, in my head a few minutes ago, thought we should start doing. If we don't, oh well. But what is a book give us a reading recommendation?
Margaret Price's Crip Space Time.
Yeah.
It's available free. You can read it. It's open access. I really like this concept that Price has on access priming. And that, again, it really emphasizes access as a collective effort.
I'm
Reading that in the van.
but
Ryan and I kind of give each other a little trouble on the podcast because I finished that book and he didn't. So I'll tell you. And so no, yeah, and so we kind of joke like, "Oh, well, once you're where I am," but that's funny because I play the straight man, which is ironic. But I play the foil to you disability scholars people on the show, and then I'm over here the only one who's complete. So that's why we think it's funny. One day Ryan will be our Dale and have completed the goal.
help probably by July.
Okay.
But I don't know. Oh, that's great. Okay, wonderful.
So is there anything else? We should probably wrap up our pod. Okay, I'll say it. Is there anything else that you'd like our listeners to hear, or anything else that you want to share in our time together today?
Oh, I just encourage people who may be new to the podcast to check out the archives, because hanging out with Hugh Ball is just lovely. It is. It is. I just come out with energy. That's what I have to say. I appreciate what you do here.
Well, thank you so much. Ryan and I got so deep into the weeds of talking about disability over a period of time, like maybe years, and then we were like, wait a minute. What if somebody was writing this down? And not because we think we're like geniuses or whatever, but just to explore all the angles, we would probably like get lost in which angles we've explored and which ones we haven't. But now they're archived, you know? So it was, yeah, exactly. And thanks to our producer Jim, we can even look back and say, okay, that episode was about this and whatever. So yeah, we appreciate you being here very much.
Yeah, thank you, Dale.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate this. And Ryan, we're going to have to do better at that communication.
Okay.
I will take responsibility for that.